Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning to log in for a dive into our 21st Century Talent Regions data display. Just a quick reminder that the chat is open for us to take questions. If you have any along the way, feel free to type them in there, and we will respond to them as soon as we are able. My name is Rachel Zajac, and I'm Chief of Staff here at Indiana's Office of Career Connections and Talent. Today, you will hear from me, as well as my colleague Stephanie Kelly. You'll also hear from Tyler Brown and Dakota Bagwell, who work for Indiana Management Performance Hub, which is the state's data agency where this data display was built. To give you a game plan of what our next hour is going to look like, so if the meeting request came through for a 3-hour time block, we'll just be using that first hour this morning. So hopefully maybe some of you that got you back about 2 hours of your day. But to give you a game plan for what this time frame is going to look like, first we're going to go ahead and overview the purpose for developing the data display. And then we'll hear from Indiana Management Performance Hub about some of the development process and data sets that went into creating it. Then we will review the various functionalities included within the map and data tiles, so you know what information you can pull and then how to pull it. Then finally, we'll dig into some of the specific data pieces itself and discuss how the metrics are calculated, reported, and then aggregated from the county to regional and state levels. So you've got a better understanding of how these numbers are pulling up as you move forward, working to derive meaning from them. I'll go ahead and get us started on some of the background then of the data display. So the data that is contained within the 21st Century Talent Regions data display was collected to be useful. Oops, how do we move that? There we go. So it was collected to be useful to local and regional leaders that are working to really leverage the power of place to grow population, to build homegrown learning systems to increase education attainment, and to coordinate economic opportunities to increase household income. It was built as a supplemental tool for the 21st Century Talent Regions initiative. And for anyone who's unfamiliar with 21st Century Talent Regions, it's a designation that's awarded in partnership by our office, the Office of Career Connections and Talent, and Indiana Economic Development Corporation, with technical assistance then provided by Civic Lab. And Civic Lab is an institute out of Columbus, Indiana. They are dedicated to advancing the practice of civic collaboration, and they do great work both locally and nationally, and a lot of work nationally with Lumina Foundation's talent hubs. So the 21st Century Talent Region designation is earned by self-defined regions of the state who've brought together members from local governments, business, K-12 education, higher education, nonprofits, economic development, and workforce development to focus on 3 main things. That is attracting, developing, and connecting talent, and then doing this collaboratively by building and implementing a plan to grow population, increase education attainment, and raise household income. So then in that vein, in terms of the relationship between the 21st Century Talent Region Initiative and the data display, 2 key pieces you'll notice are that the data display is color-coded. And it's color-coded by the 3 categories of talent attraction, development, and connection, which my colleague Stephanie will further detail a bit later in our discussion. And then secondly, is that because regions self-define, the data display can be easily adjusted geographically down to the county level. And I'll pull up this next map to show why that is important. So this map displays a current layout of how and where regions are developing as part of the 21st Century Talent Regions Initiative. So we have groupings here from a collection of counties to a singular county that have collections of cities, to even a group of 22 neighborhoods. You'll see in Marion County, a small circle represents the Indy East Promise Zone. So regions can exist very differently, and you'll also see that there is an ability for some of the regions to overlap. So what we wanted to make sure that the data display was able to do was to allow us to, and anyone to be able to click into the counties and select multiple counties in any sort of geographic layout that they would like to then aggregate that data based on that specific geographic landscape. So that's sort of where the data display became a great solution, because it allows that state, county, and anywhere in between aggregation of data. One limitation of the data display is that we aren't able yet to disaggregate some of that data in a way that communicates equity through some specific population metrics such as gender, race, ethnicity, rural versus urban, et cetera. So that is and to understand how employment or education might trend differently in a region based on various populations. So that's a piece that we're currently working on, the how might we question of getting more data derived in sort of a disaggregated way. And so then to briefly touch on what you're seeing in this map, though, those heavier circles are showing, and the ones that are in green are showing current 21st century talent region designees. So we have up Northeast Indiana, and then we have Southeast, so then we have Southeast Indiana, some of the echo region counties included there. Yellow indicates where we've received applications, and then red indicates where we have not received applications. The yellow, you'll see there are a couple different types of lines. One is a heavy line, and then one is a dotted line. The heavier line indicates all those counties were originally included in an application, and then dotted lines just indicate how a region may be developing out from what an original application may have included. So those are some of the big background pieces on how the data display is helpful for the 21st Century Talent Regions initiative specifically. We have heard awesome stories beyond the 21st Century Talent regions using the data display for various purposes, even one of a private company using it as a tool as they were trying to talk to potential recruits. So exciting to see that there are multiple ways the display is getting used. What I will go ahead and do right now is sort of turn it over to our Management Performance Hub team, so that way they can give you some more information on the data sets that have gone into the display itself.
Thank you, Rachel. This is Tyler Brown. I'm the Director of Engagement and Analytics around education and workforce for the Indiana Management Performance Hub. So just a little bit of background, quick background on the Management Performance Hub. So as Rachel kind of teed off earlier in the conversation, so we're really a service agency set up in state government to help other state agency partners and external users around technical facilitation, around data. So we're really interested in improving data sharing, both internally in the state, but also externally to groups such as yours to help with these types of initiatives. So I'm actually going to pull up the slides that we've put together. So just some high-level background of this data display before we drill in. So obviously we have the purpose statement that I think Rachel has already touched on, and then a little bit of background just on the development of the project. So we launched this actually initially back in May. All of your feedback has been very well received. We've made some edits to the dashboard that I can touch on later in the dashboard itself. So we wanted to put a slide together just from the inpatient perspective, what this project is all about for us. So whenever Secretary Milo and the Career Connections and Talent team came to us with a project like this, first we thought it was a great project supporting a key major objectives from the data and build perspective. So obviously we wanted to bring data sets together into a single location, really to drive end user accessibility of the data. So we have included state data sets that were not previously available in the dashboard, but also we're leveraging data that's already out there from many of our partners around the state to bring it into an easy, accessible location. The second thing that we wanted to do, and probably the more important, is to allow for those on-the-fly aggregations by geography. So really around an initiative like the 21st Century Talent Regions, we wanted people to be able to see how their county data corresponds to other counties' data, be able to build custom regions within the state and see what the data looks like for that region, and then also be able to aggregate statewide. So really, the why is kind of along the lines of that, but it's really to tackle the challenges around attraction, development, and connection of talent within the state. Who, that list is a lot longer than what we have here, but definitely local and regional decision makers, economic developers, recruiters, and the list goes on with applications broadly to the public as well. And then so it's important to note through an effort like this, just what is in the back end, I guess, of the data display itself. So we were able to work with 10 plus data partners from around the state and at the federal level to input data into this data display. There are 41 metrics, and like I said earlier, they're separated into the categories of attraction, development, and connection, but 41 total data metrics. So that's kind of the high level overview of the dashboard. Stephanie, do you want to dive into some of the high level functionalities of the dashboard? And I'll pull up the dashboard here too for those of you that can see our screen.
Okay, so I'm just going to briefly go over some features and functions of the display. So quickly, at the top right-hand corner of the display, you can see a last updated as of date. That just will tell you when any changes were most recently made to the data display. If you have any printed copies, that's a good reference date to check out. And then immediately under that, you'll find the data or the talent regions legend. And if you hover over the attraction, development, and connection points, you'll find their definition for the legend. So there are 3 different colors within the display. The dark blue tiles at the top correspond with the attraction pieces, which, as Rachel mentioned previously, leveraging the power of place to grow the population of the community and region. The yellow tiles are all data that we are coordinating with development, building a homegrown learning system to cultivate talent and increase educational attainment. And then the light blue tiles are data around coordinating talent with equitable economic opportunities to raise household income and earnings. So if we move over to the map, you can select a county or group of counties by clicking on your selection on the map of Indiana. You can select one county. Over here under counties selected, it's just going to display the county or groups of counties you selected. You're not going to be able to select any place other than on the map. If you want to select a grouping of counties, you'll drag over the selection, and then over on the county side, it will show you the multiple counties selected. If you want to select counties that are not directly next to each other, you'll just simply hold down the control button and then click on those other counties to pull them in as well. Another feature right to the right of the map, you'll see that there are the number of state parks. So out of the counties that we've selected, you can see that Marion, Madison, and Henry all have 1 state park each in their area. If you were only to select a county by itself that had a state park in it,
it would instead show a map of that county and some trees to signify the state park. If you select a group of counties that does not have any state parks in it, it will just simply show the display tips under the map type and legend. So we have a couple other features up at the top. Beyond the county map, we have two additional mapping features, highlight counties and heat map. These two maps do not change anything in the data tile or information below. They only make changes to the state map located at the top left-hand corner of the data display, and these maps just allow for a quick comparison of all of the counties. The highlight county map, you'll just simply drop down, select it, and this map will highlight in purple all of the counties that meet the requirement of a metric, inequality, and value that you enter in below. So the 5 metrics that we've chosen to kind of highlight, we think these are kind of our key indicators, are educational attainment, median household income, unemployment rate, 2050 population growth projection numbers, and households with computing devices. So just an example very quickly of using this, the current statewide educational attainment rate is at 36.73%. So we could use the highlight map to find all counties that are currently below a 20% educational attainment rate by selecting educational attainment, less than, and then keeping that value that's already pre-populated there, 20. And then that will show in purple the highlighted counties that fit into that category. And then you can go on and hover over the map and it will show you the county name and the educational attainment percentage. The other map is the heat map. The heat map uses the 5 metrics only to show the state as a whole in comparison. So still looking at educational attainment, each county is represented on the heat map by a different shade of orange. So the counties that are lighter in orange have lower educational attainment rates, and the counties with the higher metric data are darker orange, so higher percentage. One more thing to be aware of is printing the data display. So if you just try and print from this page, it's not going to give you the full display. So if you want to print a copy for a specific region or grouping of regions, just select them and then go down. You'll hit the download button and that will pull up options. If you select image, it will print to a PNG file for you, and then obviously PDF. That will also allow you to share it in different ways as well. The last thing I just want to touch on is that every tile has 3 elements in it to be aware of. So your main number on the tile is the data point itself. When you scroll over it, you can find more information about the number and sometimes a comparison to the state as a whole. And then the third element to be aware of is the little information button that pulls up more information about the metric name, any notes that explain the data point further, and the source, and if there is a URL to go back to the source data. So that is the main features and functions, and I will hand it back over to the MPH team to go a little further into the actual data.
Hello, so my name is Dakota Bagwell. I work with the MPH team as a business intelligence developer, and I'm the one that actually put together this map. Um, and as a special treat to you guys, I'm going to kind of go over some of the dev stuff that we've heard. So part of what we've done is we've tried to log in and listen to your guys' feedback as we've been getting it. And so this is an iteration of the dashboard that is going to be coming soon. It's not available yet, but I just wanted to show you that we are listening and that your feedback is valuable and important. So a few things you'll notice here, right? Between the two dashboards, the net migration, for example, is going to be completely different. And you're probably asking yourselves why. One of the big pain points that we heard was that it was just a confusing metric in general. And so with that, what we wanted to do was be able to show you that as a sum net migration domestic for what's selected, this is kind of what we're looking at, to the selection level, to the state level. And I will say for the net migration in general, it's best if you look at it to the single county level. So just for example, Marion. And I will highlight, because some of you, some of the feedback we've received is this seems a little light, or this seems like a little much. This is just the top 5 counties that are feeding into our Marion County, for example. So when you look at the sum of selection here, you see that a ton of people are actually leaving Marion County, and that just tells me that we have people, a lot of people traveling in and exiting as well. So with that, and then as well for your annual commute patterns as well. So this is another one where we changed it up, right? So instead of doing an average, which is what we originally had, we moved it over and we're looking at a sum. You'll notice that we actually went through and retitled some of the tiles as well, getting rid of some of the confusing jargon. Such as average of median housing price. Now we just have median housing price. What we're trying to do is keep all this information up to date as possible. And the problem is some of the tiles, in order to do the calculations, timing's a little bit different. So for example, you're going to look at median household price. You're going to see 162,000 here versus the median, the price to income ratio, and you're going to see 135 there. The difference here, please note, is the date as of in the bottom left corner. So the date as of for this tile is from 2017 versus this one, which is as recent as 2019. We would love to have all of the calculations work perfectly, but again, we have to be able to be mindful of what's available and when it's available. Yeah. With that, if there's any other questions about the data, I'd be happy to go over. It looks like we have one for the education attainment. Now, so what we're seeing here, and this is data as of 2017, right, for all of the state. Now what we're looking at is associate's degree and above attained, right? So that's everything including professional certifications. And then over the selection of the population. So then you can see that for the population for 2017, we're looking right around 36%.
So I'll go ahead and add very quickly. This is Rachel. That one of the questions came through as to why certifications, if certifications were included or not, and certifications currently are not included in that number, and that's a large reason due to how we get the data for this number. At the state level, certifications are added at about a 5% estimate. So when you break down the data that we get for post-secondary education attainment, we get data that adds in our associate degrees and above, but then we get an estimate of 5% for that certification number. So so you go ahead and then add 5% to the state number, and that will add in the certifications. But because those numbers aren't reported that way at the county level, and how this map works is that it takes all of the data at the county level and then aggregates it up from there. So that is part of a slight reason why some of the state metrics that you'll see in the data display, even once we push this new version that is in our development page out, will have slight differences from a metric that is reported straight from the state level, because the math behind it might be slightly different. So just as a note there, when we're considering any of the data in this display, it is aggregating all of it up from the specific county level up to then the state level or the regional selection level. We'll go ahead and turn the webinar over to Tyler Brown, who's with the Indiana Management Performance Hub as well. And he is going to go ahead and dig into some of the specific data points with you, hopefully answer some questions around, how the metric math goes into these pieces, as well as some of the more common questions we've received about some of the data.
Hello, everybody again. Thanks, Rachel. So now I'm going to actually dive into some of these data points. And I also wanted to show something that will also be made available on the website moving forward. So we got a lot of questions about calculations underneath of each tile. So we've put together this nice user guide. It aligns the tiles from the dashboard to show the calculations underneath of each. So there's a couple of things to note here. So let's just pick a couple of examples. So for the sum of the population, obviously what that's indicating is that we have a population count at the county level. The sum is what we're doing to aggregate to the state or the custom region level. So any of those aggregate naming conventions in this document is how we are actually doing the aggregations whenever you hover over multiple counties. So taking another example, let's jump to the fourth column on the top row, which coincides to the ratio, house price to median household income. So it's important to note whenever we have like an average next to a median. So really what we're doing in this type of metric is that we're being reported from the Indiana Realtors Association a median housing price. And then to aggregate to the state or custom region, we are taking the average of that median housing price. And similarly, in the denominator there, with median household income being reported at the county level, and then we're taking an average of that metric to that custom geography that's selected. There's only really two types of aggregations that are happening on the county level data. So it's either going to be a sum, especially if it's a count number. If we don't have the count available, or if it is similar to like the median housing price or median household income, then we're taking averages to group that data together at the custom geography level. So this will be made available on the website above the dashboard. It's not currently, but just know that it's coming, and we can send it out after the webinar, even just to preempt if anybody has any questions. So I think what I want to do now is actually just dive into specific metrics. We won't do them all, but if you have any ones that might be bring up questions, definitely put them in the chats for our Q&A. So I'm really just going to start with the attraction metrics. They're at the top of the dashboard. I'll click through some of the functionality of the dashboard and show kind of what's going on. So obviously, as Stephanie mentioned, what's being reported is based on the map selection. So right now we are at the state level, so the statewide level currently. So you can see for the current population tile, you can see the count, the sum there. So that's summing all of the counties underneath of it up to a whole metric. If you hover over the number itself, in this case, I'll click on a county so that it makes a little bit more sense, but basically for current population, we're looking at comparing that selection to the state as a whole, if you have a select geography selected. If you wanted to see how much percent a region makes of the state, that's possible on the dashboard, and I'll actually show that here. So we'll just let's just take a cut here in the center of the state. And it's aggregating that data. That's where some of these wait times are coming in. So you can see now if I hover over, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. So it's showing the population for that region, it's showing the population of the state, and it's showing the percent of the state's population in that selected county region. Moving to the I tile, the I feature on the tile. So this is the little information button that we've included. This is really the go-to shop for understanding. Obviously, we've had to abbreviate some of the names just to fit them into the tile. So here you can find the full metric name if it's a little bit unclear what the tile abbreviations are trying to say. You can see the full metric name, any notes, which is essentially going to be a description of that data set or the data set that's feeding into that tile. The source in which we receive it from, if you want to go explore different variations of the data or just learn more about that data point itself. And then we've even included a URL. If you want to actually quickly go to that source and learn a little bit more, you can click on the I and it'll automatically take you to the location. So obviously we're pulling that one from Stats Indiana, which is pulling it from the Census Bureau. And then the last thing that you'll see on each tile is how often the metric is refreshed. So this is a fairly young project still. So we've been working hard recently on getting more automated refreshes into this data display. That's definitely a next step for us, is just to ensure that all of the tiles are being fed with the most recent data available. And I think going back to what Dakota mentioned earlier, you'll see that this version that I'm showing might not completely match the one that's on the CCT webpage right now, and that's due to either some of the questions that we received and adjustments that we made to how we're aggregating metrics, or it's just more recent data that we've refreshed recently. And we will be pushing this to the CCT website shortly. So I'll just move down the list and do a couple more metrics. So a couple ones that we've received questions on, so I think I'll hit on them, is the net migration and the annual commuter trends. I'll start with net migration. So you can go to the I and see what's being built into this tile. There are two numbers here, which I think might create some confusion. For net migration, if you hover over it, the first one is the domestic, and the latter is the net international migration. So we're still selected to this county region. I just want to mention again, so this isn't the statewide, this is for that grouping of counties. So it's similar in that the top metric, the sum of the selection, is giving you the sum of the domestic migration, the net domestic migration for those counties. And then you're getting the statewide total, just so that you don't have to keep clicking back and forth. And it'll even give you a difference, just to try to understand patterns and whether a certain region is having similar migration to the state as a whole. Hovering over the I will give you a lot more information on what exactly is going on in the notes section. So a much more sentence-driven description of what the tile is actually showing, and then the source and the URL. And again, you can click on it. This one also takes you to Stats Indiana, like some of the earlier census level metrics do. And you can learn about the metric, and even look into the data for more historical trends if they're not provided. And then similar with the net international migration, operates the same way as the domestic. It's just a different look at similar data. For the annual commuter trends, this is one that we've actually received a lot of feedback on, and I'm actually working to fix currently, if fix is the right term. So really what's going on in the annual commuter trends tile, you can see here that it's an indicator. It contains two metrics as well. So the number of people living outside the county and commuting into the county for work, and the number of people living in the county and commuting outside for work. So there's an in, which are the people that are living outside of the county and moving in, and then there's the out. So kind of the ebb and flow. We've received a lot of feedback that these numbers don't seem to align with what some of the local or regional entities are seeing, and that's true, and I think should have been noted more upfront in the tile, is that what we started with was a top 5, as you'll see in the hover, is a top 5 counties in and a top 5 counties out. So it is only a percentage of the overall annual commuting trends for this area, the area selected. And we are working right now with our great friends at the Indiana Business Research Center and the Stats Indiana page to get the full numbers out there, just to eliminate some of that confusion. So that'll be coming in a not too distant iteration as well. And again, I'll just show the functionality in, so you can click on the I tile and it'll bring you to the actual page. And we'll let the source data people speak to that data point a lot better than we could with the space allotted to us. So definitely feel free with these new functionalities to dive into these metrics, see what's actually going into them on the back end, and provide us any feedback. So I'll just finish off the top row and then hand it back to Rachel. So I wanted to touch on one other point, which I think would just be a tricky point in the data, which Dakota touched on earlier, but I'll just mention again, is for the housing price to household income ratio. So if you hover over the icon itself, you can see the metrics that are involved in the calculation. Average median housing price. So it's really the median housing price that's averaged to that selection in the county map. And then the same with the median household income. So you can see that that's kind of and if we go back to the tile page, I'll just do that to drive it home. You can see here for that tile that those are the two, and you can see which one's acting as the numerator and which is the denominator. Essentially creating this ratio. So you can see here that we got the data from the Indiana Association of Realtors. You can click on the I button, it'll take you off to their data page if you want to see more historical trends in that data. But the important thing to note are how these tiles are linked, because obviously the median housing price is included in both, but they show as different. So essentially what we wanted to do, just to make this as statistically sound as we could in the aggregations that we're doing, is even though we had updated median housing price data to the month from the Realtors Association, we couldn't really put that in the ratio just based on our limitations and the lag in the data for the median household income that's being provided from the Census Bureau. So you can see in the tile, as you hover over, the price to income ratio is data to 2017, whereas we can see in the median household, it's actually 2019 data. So we wanted to be mindful of providing the most updated data, but also keeping data within the calculations, creating the tiles within the same year and time frame. So with that, I think I will pass it back to Rachel just to close us out here. And see if there were any questions that came.
Okay. So good morning, everyone, again. And We do have some questions about the education attainment data, so we can go back and think through some of those pieces for how we have aggregated that. It has definitely been a discussion, and how we are pulling many of these data points has very much been a thoughtful discussion for each tile. So to the extent that tiles are helping or not making sense, we are very absolutely interested in hearing some of that feedback, because ultimately we want this to be an informational tool that is useful, especially as we're able to look at the county level or look at various groupings of counties and have the data aggregate with the ability to include changing geographies. So following this webinar, if you do have questions or you do have feedback on some of the data tiles themselves or how you've been able to use them, you can absolutely share those with us at secretary@cct.in.gov. If you email that email address, we will receive all those questions there. I'll also share my contact information and some of the teams following the webinar, including the math sheet, as well as some metric details that are outlined in an Excel document so you can read into them. Do use the little I button that Tyler referenced. It's definitely helpful to further dig into some of the data pieces. But with that, we will go ahead and close off our webinar this morning. Thank you to those who joined, and we do hope that stepping through some of the pieces of the data display helps everyone understand not only how to use it and some of the functionalities you can pull from it, but understand how some of this data is aggregated and pulled up and how some of the specific tiles work. If you want to dig into more of the tiles, again, that metric math sheet will be very helpful as well. So thank you very much, and we'll be happy to take a couple minutes for questions if they come. Oh, yep, there we go. Dakota shared the secretary email address. The recording will be available. Yes, the recording will be available, and Sarah, I will have to go ahead and follow up with you on the first question you asked to pull some recommendations from folks who know more about those data pieces and probably likely the other indicators that would go into being able to make an assumption based on what would be ideal for just one of the data points. So the web address to access the tool is going to be www.in.gov/cct/datadisplay.htm. Yep, so it looks like we have it in the chat box now. I'll go ahead and send that out in a follow-up as well. And I will also notify the group when these updates that are in the development page have been pushed to the front page. So that way everyone will have that notification as well. And so as we are having a couple more questions come through the chat, noting that the data display that is currently up on the website, it is slightly different than some of the pieces that we did just present. Some of those functionalities and then number updates are not yet populated through to our data display. So what we're going to this week go ahead and hit a push to the development, from the development page to our actual data display page. Those updates will take a little bit just to push on through an update through the display itself. So once those updates have come through on the public facing side of the page, we'll make sure that everyone knows that that update has happened and that the functionalities are now all accessible within the main page of the data display. Okay, and thank you everyone for joining the webinar this morning. Again, if you have further questions, please feel free to follow up with us, and we'll be happy to get those answered and work you through any questions you might have. Thanks very much.